And you have a half-orc child without it having cancer. Let's dive into the lore of my mangas based on my D&D game. And as we discussed last time, it does not matter whether you're a human trying to get a female orc pregnant or a human trying to get pregnant by a male orc. At the end of the day, your child will have developmental issues. However, there are ways to mitigate this. And it all has to deal with biology. So let's take a look at some more deep diving from the mating manual. I need y'all to understand this is a college course where we're diving into like 102, 201 levels of education of orc anatomy. And we're getting into the weeds here because the orc's entry is already 15-ish pages long. And once again, the issue that we're having is with male orcs, the sperm is the issue trying to integrate with a human female egg. And this is going to take us into orc history because the original orcs were called orcans. Those are what you were familiar with from Warhammer to traditional D&D and other mainstream fantasy. But at the turn of the era, an evolution in orcs happened that allowed them to gain muscle mass quickly, but also leverage magic and utilize a longer lifespan, which is why they are different. And the thing about orcans is they have the education of about a 15-year-old. That's where they kind of max out at, and they are hyper aggressive, which is a good way why they got phased out, because they didn't integrate into the world very well. But even though orcans do not exist right now, they do carry on through the blood of orcs. And if you're trying to have a child with an orc, it is super important that you know about their lineage. And an easy way to tell for female orcs is annotated by their horns. The least amount of horns that they have, one set, indicates that they are very far from orcan bloodline. However, if they have a max of 3, they are very close to their orcan bloodlines. Like if you go into my Night of Slaughter manga series, in chapter 10, you remember the tatted orc lady? If you look at her head, let's see, there are 3 sets of horns, meaning she is extremely close to her orcan ancestry, which means that the chemicals that she's going to release into her sperm dome and also in the flow vines are going to be very, very potent. And for human sperm, that means a more rapid and severe breakdown of the sperm cells. And as we talked about, the more damage to a human sperm cell, the more damage that the half-orc is most likely going to have once it's born. So having babies with a 3-setted horned orc is not a good way to go about trying to have a half-orc child, because you are almost guaranteed that they are going to have some of the most severe situations in terms of health conditions. But if we're talking 2 orcs having babies together, then the more horns, the more potent, the more concentrated these chemicals are, the better, because it sends the sperm into a bigger frenzy, which ends up meaning the more DNA they take into themselves and integrate into each sperm, meaning a healthier, stronger orc. But if we go to my Devil's Deal series, we see another orc, and she only has 1 horn. And by the way, this is not a horn, this is the horn. This is just literally part of her hair. And ironically enough, she is married to a man named Pym, who has a child. Granted, it's an adopted child, but Luna would actually be a really good candidate in order to actually have a child with. Because while you're probably going to end up with some health conditions, they're going to be minimalized because her chemicals are not as potent. For the ladies who love a sensitive but strong orc man, how can you tell? Well, I got bad news. There's really no way, unless you're doing like blood testing, to figure out how close to their orcish heritage these guys really are. So you're pretty much shooting in the dark unless you're getting tested. But if you want to know more about the lore, go read the mangas. They are free. Or hit up the TikTok shop or description to get a copy of the Night of Slaughter, Devil's Deal. Or if you're a connoisseur of the finer things in life like the mating manual, grab a Ruby Gold sub to watch its development or get an original character in the lore by grabbing a diamond.